What we know about fires is they don't actually contain themselves within state boundaries or local government boundaries. It's very much a national issue. And one of the key things that we learned through the fires was the need to actually be coordinated. So, what did we learn? How do we prepare better for the future? How do we make sure that we can actually be more coordinated? What do we need from both a state and a national level leadership perspective so that we can actually be in a better position to manage fires going forward? And we know that they're going to happen. So, what have we learned and how do we actually get better?
Yeah, thanks, Heather. I think, what these fires highlighted is that when it came to protection of biodiversity during the fires, we really were caught on the hop. And so a lot of the efforts that happened, we saw these images of saving the Wollemi pine and rescuing bristlebirds, but these are really isolated examples. And there's lots more that can be done to sort of ensure that we've got a much more sort of strategic approach to managing biodiversity during these fire events. And so, we asked biodiversity and operational staff after the fires, okay, well, what did you do and what worked and what didn't work and what needs to change going forward? And it was pretty unanimous, I think, in some of the responses that we got. Having plans in place, before the fire is kind of critical. Having biodiversity representatives in the control room to sort of interpret and help guide action was really important. Having up-to-date current data, all of the things that you would expect that are kind of required. But people really focused on, in terms of when things went right and when things worked, that the issue of, not the issue, people collaborating and working together and advocating and making sure agencies, were working together, it was kind of critical. So as you say, we need to get a lot better at that. Some of the people that we spoke to sort of talked about the importance of having standards for planning, standards for training, thinking about having interoperable, sort of accessible data systems. So I think that thing about, fires don't respect boundaries. And so we need to make sure that we're working together. And I think, yes, that's where that kind of national level coordination is really critical. So making sure that states and organisations and communities are really talking to each other.
And maybe if I could add just a little bit, I think we do need to have the conversation at some stage. There's been a tradition of fire operations prioritising human life and property, but not key biodiversity assets. So a shed or a haystack may be a bit more protected than a site at which a threatened species, the only site at which a threatened species may occur. And we will lose something irretrievably if we continue with that prioritisation. And the other obvious preparatory point is that we do need to tackle much more effectively than what we're doing at the moment the fundamental underlying cause of these fires, and that's climate change, global climate change. So we'll get nowhere if we don't tackle that one seriously.
Yeah. No, I think on that note, I can't believe I forgot to mention integrated decision making. But the other, the other point on being more prepared. Most of the people we spoke to were like, we need, acting during an event. That's last minute stuff, and there's so many things that can go wrong. It's so risky, and whether you can even implement actions is, it can be out of your control. So making sure that there is more done prior to the fire to sort of spread those risks. So whether we're talking about translocating or doing sort of integrated threat management, because we need to increase the resilience of these systems prior to these events, because waiting till they happen, it's too late.
The thing I would sort of add to, from a bush heritage perspective, we had fires across 7 reserves across the country. And one of the big learnings for us was about that preparedness. We thought we were prepared, but how do you actually increase that preparedness? How do you actually move crews around the countryside, work in with other agencies, work across land tenures, and so that you're getting far more of a coordinated approach. So I think there is some great learnings. Unfortunately, as human beings, we sometimes forget them as time goes by. I live on the edge of Black Saturday, and I wonder how much we've lost from that, event. So I think what's going to be really important is that we continue to have the discussions, and that as combined groups, we work together from a policy perspective to tackle these, so that we don't forget the learnings from the Black Summer, and we embed them into how we operate going forward, which is going to be critical.
And I think just one of the other points that Libby didn't so much touch on, but that is also critical, is that coordination and interaction needs to be present and embedded in the post-fire response. So a lot of it was not the immediate emergency, but what happened in the weeks and months afterwards in terms of road clearing, land clearing, refuges and other things. So really connecting up our communities and our organisations and our different agencies. It's important and critical in the emergency, and that's something that Libby's looked a lot at, but it's also critical in the recovery phase as well.
Absolutely.
And we shouldn't damn the response that was made. There was some extraordinary collaboration across governments and communities, and sort of seeking community input into much of the recovery effort by governments. I can't think of a previous example of such a response to a natural calamity in Australia.
And absolutely, and we need to sort of enable and really recognise and invest in those places and those agencies and systems that facilitated that coordination, because I think that's something that's an underappreciated part of the response is the layers of different agencies who've actually been really critical glue for coordinated responses.
And the fires affected people at local and regional and state and Commonwealth levels, and I think the response needs to recognise that we've got to work across all of those scales.
Yeah,
completely agree. We've got to work across all the scales. Be prepared, look at the full aspects from preparation through to post. So thank you very much for the conversation on that aspect.